this is exciting, isn't it?
Here we go, guys, in 5, 4, 3. Here we go.
It's time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Thank you for good programming. I appreciate the content and really enjoyed every moment.
It's a privilege to have you on your station and listen. It's good stuff. It's very educational.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hey, on this Wednesday, January 22nd, before we do or say anything else, this is the 2-year anniversary of the death of Lynn Bramer. And if you knew him from the airwaves of XRT, you knew him. Because I knew him personally, and I'm telling you, he was that guy. There was no stage presence, no stage persona. He was brilliant. He was one of the, if not possibly the most well-read human being I have ever known. He was funny. He was wry. He was down to earth. And he is still missed. You know, we're going to be going through a lot of mud. Really nasty, dirty, stinky mud. It's already started. But it is going to be the bright spots that get us through. The people we know and love who get us through. Mark Elias, the very famous Democratic lawyer who writes Democracy Docket. He said, we now know that the institutions are not going to fight for us. The really, really wealthy are not going to fight for us. We have to fight for ourselves. And when we are resisting and speaking up for the next 2 years, it is going to be like-minded people who share our love of country, and maybe also at the same time share a wonderful outlook and sense of humor. Those are the folks that are going to keep us moving forward. People like Lynn Bramer. And believe me, if Lynn Bramer had not succumbed to prostate cancer, he would be leading the charge. So what is interesting that's going on today? Well, Michael Fanone swore live on CNN this morning. It was in reaction to, of course, Stuart Rhodes, one of the most egregious offender of January 6th, getting his little pardon and pat on the head from Donald Trump. And they cut to Michael Fanone and they said, what do you think? And live on CNN, he dropped an F-bomb. Now, when somebody drops an F-bomb on radio, we have a little button we can hit that drops that audio, and so hopefully the F-bomb or whatever bomb it is doesn't go out over the air. But on television live like that, they don't have that. And you know what? I am 100% behind former D.C. police officer Michael Fanone, who is still suffering from the injuries he received that day. Even before he dropped the F-bomb on CNN this morning, he put out a quote about these January 6th people being released. I have been betrayed by my country, and I've been betrayed by those that supported Donald Trump, whether you voted for him because he promised these pardons or for some other reason. You knew that this was coming, and here we are. More than 1,500 January 6th insurrectionists have been pardoned. Some say Trump's trying to put together his own militia. Well, whether or not he's putting together his own militia, the message is very clear. Very clear. If you commit violence, even if you commit violence against a cop, but you do it on my behalf, you're going to be okay. You are going to be A-OK. You know, a lot of the police unions supported Donald Trump. I don't know how they square that with these pardons. It could have been them. So if there are riots in Chicago because, I don't know, something Donald Trump says or does and his supporters come out and start wreaking havoc and cops show up and the cops get assaulted, that's now okay. That's now okay. So, there you go. Just thought you ought to know. Even the Wall Street Journal. You know, I told you I subscribe to the Wall Street Journal. If you don't know this about newspapers, it's almost like newspapers are two separate businesses. There's the editorial side and the news side. And they really are not supposed to have any kind of influence or interaction on one another. So the Wall Street Journal reporters are really good at what they do. Back in the first Trump administration, the Wall Street Journal broke some of the stories about some of the problems and corruption of his administration. Now, the Wall Street Journal editorial board, oh, well, that's a different story. They are all in on Republicans, yay, from morning till night. Except yesterday. Yesterday, the very right-wing Rupert Murdoch-owned Wall Street Journal editorial board took the Trump administration to task for the January 6th pardons. Even, remember this, it's not getting any coverage now, and he's been very quiet. But wasn't all that long ago, a couple of weeks ago, that J.D. Vance said that anybody who had committed violence on January 6th should not be pardoned? Yeah, you're not going to hear him say that again. The Wall Street Journal editorial board is excoriating these January 6th pardons. They say out of roughly 1,600 cases filed by the feds, more than a third included accusations of assaulting, resisting, or impeding law enforcement. The ones who got jail, because there were a lot of people prosecuted, you may not know this, a lot of people were prosecuted but never got any jail time. But of the people who did get jail time were the ones who were charged with the worst of the violence. And this editorial names names. And it mentions the names of the people convicted of the violence, and it mentions the violence they committed. Here's how the editorial ends. After they go through this litany of the names of the people, how many months they were sentenced to, and the violence they committed. I'll read you the last name. Michael Joseph Foy was sentenced to 40 months, brought a hockey stick with a Trump flag attached, which he swung over his head and downward at police officers as if he were chopping wood. And that's like the least violent of all the ones they list. See, people brought brass knuckles. They brought pepper spray. They used electroshock weapons. It's just staggering. Anyway, the editorial concludes, there are more like this, which everyone understood on January 6th and shortly afterward. Quote, there is nothing patriotic about what is occurring on Capitol Hill, unquote, one GOP official tweeted. Quote, this is third world style, anti-American anarchy, unquote. That was Marco Rubio. Now, Mr. Trump's Secretary of State. He was right. What happened that day is a stain on Mr. Trump's legacy. By setting free the cop beaters, the president adds another. What happened that day is a stain on Mr. Trump's legacy. By setting free the cop beaters, the president adds another. This is from not any Democratic publication or pundit. This is from the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal. And if you read those editorials on a regular basis, you understand just how jaw-dropping this is. But it's done. And I got to tell you, if I were a cop, if I were a cop who supported Donald Trump, I'd be really rethinking that about now. Because if you think that any Trump supporter attacks you and is going to face justice, face any jail time, you've just been shown that will not be the case. If somebody hurts you as you try to rein in a riot or a protest, and Donald Trump judges those people to be on his side, he is going to hang you out to dry. A little bit of good news today. Doge, or Dogie, or Doggy, as I like to call it. Remember that was Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk, and they were going to have this unofficial government agency that Donald Trump created out of whole cloth, and they were going to find redundancies and inefficiencies and waste. And then it was, and then all of a sudden Donald Trump said, you know, Vivek, you're from Ohio. You really should ask Governor Mike DeWine to give you J.D. Vance's seat in the Senate. And Vivek Ramaswamy said, thanks, but no thanks. But you know what? I think I will run for governor in Ohio. Well, there may have been more to that decision. There may have been more to that decision than we knew. In some exclusive reporting from the Washington Post, apparently Vivek and Elon, the two billionaire tech bros who seem to be like-minded, apparently they weren't so like-minded. Even when this doggy department was first created, they realized they couldn't work together. And so they said, okay, Elon, you take this part and I'm going to take this part. From the get-go, they knew they couldn't work together. But apparently, as it progressed, Elon was getting all the attention and making all the waves. And Vivek was being shunted aside. He was, after a very short time, viewed not as a co-leader with Elon, but rather a subordinate to Elon. And that did not sit well. So when the opportunity to take an off-ramp presented itself, Vivek took it. I mean, this was Doggy was created just a few weeks ago. They appeared to be all chummy. But according to the Washington Post, tensions soon emerged that paved the way for the eventual split. They interviewed a bunch of people who are on the inside, and they talked about what happened. And apparently the split came as close to being public. Remember when Musk was given a lot of pushback because he said, well, yes, immigration should be stopped unless, of course, they're the, the HB1 visas. Anyway, the visas that the tech companies use to bring in high-level talent from other countries. And all of a sudden, MAGAs were like, wait a minute. Those were supposed to be our jobs, remember? We were going to shut down all immigration, and now you're saying except? You're going to carve out exceptions that suit you? No, that wasn't the deal. Well, apparently Vivek Ramaswamy wrote an editorial about it, and he also was excoriated in MAGA circles for this whole idea that, wait a minute, we're going to close the border to immigrants except for the immigrants you guys want? And that's going to be different? So as time went on, people started viewing Vivek Ramaswamy more as, like I said, a subordinate to Elon. Because, Elon is all about the media. And, of course, he controls Twitter. So any idea or statement of his that he wants to magnify it's a pretty easy thing for him to do. And Vivek Ramaswamy didn't like being a second banana. And apparently, some people are even speculating that Donald Trump's suggestion that he take J.D. Vance's seat in the Senate was because Trump actually was trying to shunt him aside as well. He saw his efforts to look at the policies and look at the regulations. That was what Vivek was going to do. He was going to look at policy. He was going to look at regulation. And he was going to try to figure out a way to make that all more business-friendly. Donald Trump, apparently, though, would rather give all the power to Elon Musk. And here's the weird part. This is really weird. So Elon Musk is now the head of Doggy, despite the fact that he has an explicit conflict of interest with the fact that he has companies that do business with the government, has millions in federal contracts, et cetera, and so forth. What does Elon Musk see as the end game? What does Elon Musk want to accomplish? Apparently, his overarching goal is not getting rid of government waste, not streamlining the procedure. He wants his people to have access to all the websites and all the data. And he wants one thing and one thing only. He wants us to go to Mars. That's what Elon wants to get out of Doggy. That's if he can get the government moving to Mars, all will be good. Can you believe that? I mean, not that I don't think, going to Mars is a bad thing, but you're going to completely restructure the government to create the money and the interest in going to Mars. That's your overarching goal? So, we're going to Mars, kids. At least until Donald Trump decides he's had enough of Elon Musk. I've told you repeatedly that one of my favorite people emerging from all this is Democratic Senator Chris Murphy. He talked, because remember on Inauguration Day, all the tech billionaires were seated in front of Donald Trump's cabinet picks. Ooh, we know there's an obvious sign of the pecking order. Chris Murphy talked about the tech billionaires, and just as Joe Biden pointed out in his farewell address, we are on our way to an oligarchy. An oligarchy is ruled by the wealthy. We're supposed to have this democratic, constitutional, 3 branches of government, but we seem, with the help of Republicans in elected office, to be willing to give that up, to be ruled by the whims and desires of rich people. Chris Murphy talked about these tech billionaires and how they very well could bring about the death of democracy. Listen to this.
What you saw today was surgical. It was precise. Not every CEO of a major American company was up on that stage. Who was up there in front of the cabinet? The CEOs of the major information companies in this country, the people who control through their algorithms and their editorial policy the information that the vast majority of Americans consume. How democracy dies is a fairly simple story. First, you intimidate your opposition into staying home. And that's what he's doing by endorsing political violence today and threatening to lock up the people who investigated him over the past 10 years. But then you control the media. You cut deals with all the people who own the information channels, and you tell them to just chill out on criticism, pump up my own narrative, and in exchange, I'll make you a little bit richer. That's exactly what's happening today. That's exactly what's happening. And democracy doesn't die in a heartbeat. It doesn't die overnight. It dies because gradually the truth doesn't appear on your information channels. It dies gradually as folks just decide to stay home instead of risk showing up on somebody's enemies list. The moment is really dire, and we've got to tell that story to people.
What's the remedy?
The remedy is to go out there and build a political opposition that stops this corruption. I mean, everybody said that the Affordable Care Act was going to be repealed in 2017. It wasn't, because we went out and built a political constituency to stop it. On the left, we've got to build our own media ecosystem. We've got to make sure that if places like Facebook and Twitter aren't venues where people can hear us, that we've got alternative forums where the truth can get out. So we've got work to do to organize the public. We've got logistical work to do to make sure that there are fair-minded platforms that hear all messages. But that's the work we've got to do. We've got to do it beginning today with urgency.
Yes, we do. We've got to begin it today, though actually we've been doing that work for a while here at WCPT. Remember I didn't mention the phone lines, but we are opening them up. I know sometimes, and I'm with everything going on with the Trump administration, it's really hard for me to almost take a breath when I first start the show. There's so many things that I want to say, but the phone lines are open. 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. I've already gotten a bunch of texts. Well, I'm going to take a real quick break, and I'm going to read through the texts. We are going to talk more about what is going on, the good, the bad, and the ugly, when we come right back after this.
There's no excuse to miss Joan Esposito.
It's number one on my stereo.
Live, local, and progressive. You can listen to her daily at WCPT820.com on your computer or phone.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
We have a couple of callers. I will get to your calls. I want to real quick. We got some great texts. Somebody texted in that they had heard from a friend in Kansas that ICE is going door to door in Olathe and Shawnee. And this person is reminding that we don't have that problem here as of yet. And Brandon Johnson and J.B. Pritzker are going to make sure ICE operates within the letter of the law here. But this is what folks in Kansas are being told. Don't answer any questions regarding people's legal status. Even if you know for sure they're here legally, stick with I don't know or invoke the fifth. Don't talk to people who show up at your door. And this person says, and we're gonna confirm this, we're going to be talking about immigration a lot in the next couple of weeks. They need a judicial warrant signed by a judge, not an administrative warrant, which is what they try to get people with. They're operating under arrest everyone now, check legality later. That's why it's important to not say anything. And you do not have to let anybody in your house unless they have an official legal warrant. That I do remember from the last time Trump was in office. Somebody else texted in, are there any rich billionaire Democrats who could buy TikTok? Well, it has long been lamented that Democrats pretty much stayed away from media buys. That's why we have so many thousands of conservative radio stations. And, we've got the Sinclair Television Group, about 200 stations owned by a right-wing company that makes the local anchors read op-eds and things that make it sound like it's what they think, because they know they know that people trust their local anchors. You've seen those posts on social media where they'll take like 50 Sinclair stations and anchors supposedly reading opinion pieces that are exactly word for word the same station after station. So, yes, Democrats have been reticent to get into the media space. But overall, I will tell you, and this probably shouldn't surprise you knowing how our country works, there are a lot more Republican billionaires than there are Democratic billionaires. But that is something that I think has been one of the worst oversights, a lack of investment in local media. And, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. MSNBC is in the process of being spun off, along with a few other things that NBC says it doesn't want anymore. And the guy who's in charge of the company that now has is shortly going to have CNBC and MSNBC, Keith Olbermann, no matter what you think about him, and even in his own estimation, he can be a jerk. He said, MSNBC has a corner on the market. CNN is trying to split the baby and try to just be down the middle. Fox is definitely not down the middle, nor is Newsmax or OANN. MSNBC, who else does liberal democratic media, liberal democratic talk? And what does the new head of this company that MSNBC is going to be spun into, what does the new head suggest? Maybe MSNBC would do better if there were more Republican voices. Yeah, because that model is working so well for CNN. CNN is bleeding viewers. Every cable station, except for Fox, pretty much every cable station that does news of any kind took a huge hit after the election. People were they needed a break. But with the Trump presidency, just watch. MSNBC is going to come roaring back. And if the bosses really think by watering down the prominent Democratic voice on television, if they think watering that down is the way to attract more viewers, they have no business making these decisions. So we'll see what happens. So Bob texted in to remind me that, because I mentioned that Michael Fanone said the F-bomb on CNN this morning, and the anchor kind of apologized. Cable does have much more latitude to say bad words than regular over-the-air television. But, Bob, I promise you, if they'd have had a way to dump that, I promise you they would have. It doesn't mean that they're going to be letting the F-bomb out. Somebody else texted in how they have been reaching out to their representatives. That's what we all have to do. Your assignment in the coming week is I want you to put together either a piece of paper or a document on your computer, and I want you to put down your state representative and their office and their email and their phone number. Your state senator, their office address, their email, and their phone number. Your congressperson, same, office address, email, phone number. Both of your state senators, office address, email, telephone number. And I want you to keep it. And at least a couple times a month, I want you to use those numbers to reach out and express your thoughts on what that person is doing or not doing. And let them know what you want them to do. Okay? Oh, lots more texts, but the phone lines are stacking up like planes over O'Hare. So I'm going to jump in. First of all, we're going to start with our good friend Jim from Chicago. Hello, Jim.
Hi, Joan. Patty Vasquez is probably looking for St. Bernard to get to the airport this week.
Yeah, she was in New Orleans with all that snow.
Yeah, with all these the edicts coming from this criminally minded monarch that we have, that the Democrats wanted to stay home, wanted to see the experiment in reality, got 48 hours of it. But he took us out of the Paris climate. Mm-hmm. Again, denying science. The Republicans deny science, just as they did in the pandemic. In the meantime, you can't go in the continental United States, Joe, without, you'd have to press for, I guarantee you got to have a cardigan with you no matter where you go. If you were going down to Miami today. I mean, that's how strange the weather is, Joe. I know you're about 4 years younger than I am. I've never seen weather like this. Never.
Well,
all over the continental United States.
I remember from growing up, I mean, I grew up when I was a little girl. I grew up in the snow belt of Cleveland. We were just close enough to Lake Erie. But the extremes, I've never seen so many hurricanes that were so powerful. Places that have a lot of timber usually have some fires from time to time. But the fires we've been seeing, it's just off the charts. And I remember when my daughter and I, more than a couple, before I started doing this show full time, my daughter and I went to Australia. I'd always wanted to see the Great Barrier Reef. And the people who took us out to the reef said that there had been some die-off, but that if things got like 1.5 degrees Celsius warmer, they feared that the entire Great Barrier Reef was going to die. Well, guess what happened this year, Jim? We hit that mark. The whole Earth is 1.5 degrees Celsius warmer than before the industrial age, which is how they compare it. So,
how much money, Joan, how much money do these oil executives and these billionaires running the tech industry, how much money do they want, Joan? What do they think they can do? Go to Mars? I already feel like I'm on Mars with this guy as president. And seriously, there's only a handful of them, really. What do they think they're going to do? Have a hoedown somewhere? Musk and Bezos and the boys are going to have a hoedown somewhere where there's going to be no population left. You won't be able to go anywhere. But this is unbelievable that they're pulling us out of this climate agreement. And then they have this insane thing with China. He loves China. China this and China that. Even Rubio, he's some kind of a war hawk with China. I don't get it. And you know what the Chinese response was? Listen, we're still in the agreement. You're the ones that are jumping out of it. So let's get down to cases here. You know what I mean? It's 4 years of this. You're going to hear China till you go nuts.
Yeah.
Anyway, Joan, I hope Danny gets out of there safely. And, you went down there to avoid this inauguration because it's so painful to even think about. And then you're thinking the weather might be halfway decent in New Orleans, and it's a foot of snow.
I know.
Yes,
I know. It's crazy.
Are we in for insane 4 years? Thanks, Joe.
Yes.
Thank you much.
The bottom line is yes. Thank you, Jim. Thanks for the call. Let's go back to the phone lines. Mary is on the line from Carroll Stream. Hi, Mary. Thanks so much for the call today.
Oh, hey, how are you? Hi, everybody. What
would you like to talk about?
Well, the tax cuts that he did in 2016, it just... for the truck drivers, it costs us more to work. And, I'm a 710 Teamster truck driver. I got to give a shout out to my Teamsters. But, it's not so much the Republicans won or the maggots. It's more that the Democrats lost it because they went too far left and anybody did right. And they just pushed everybody away. Everybody sat at home.
Well, that was a big part of this election, the people who, for whatever reason, didn't vote. I talked to a couple of people who collect data on this, and I said, look, I don't care who voted. I don't care who voted, why they voted. What I want to know about is the registered Democratic voters who, in the millions, decided not to vote this time around. Those are the people I want you to talk to. Those are the people I want to hear why they didn't vote.
People are like, oh, privatize Social Security. Well, it doesn't cost you to get your check now, but once they privatize it, it's all about them making money. It's going to cost you to get your money.
That's exactly right. And remember, Social Security is not an entitlement. You paid into it. I paid into it. I'm still paying into it. You're still paying into it. Even if you collect it, you're still... And it is our money that you guys have been keeping and investing, and it's time to give it back to us.
Well, and not only that, there's not going to be jobs like I'm working or my husband works for UPS out of Catch. There's not going to be those jobs for our children to pay into for when we collect ours. There's not going to be those jobs to pay into. We're paying into what the boomers are collecting, and the boomers before them.
And one thing I want to point out, because you may hear this from Republicans and Trump about, Social Security is running out of money. Did you know that if you're, let's say, Mary, you made $10 million a year. When you pay into Social Security, when you reach a certain level, you don't pay in anymore. They stop taking it out of your check. If they took that cap off, if you make $10 million a year, they should be taking Social Security out of every single check you get. If they if they would remove that cap and people would, even if they make millions, would still be paying into Social Security, we would never, ever have to worry about funding.
I mean, but there's AOC. She nailed it right. There's always money for the military industrial complex, but there's never enough money for free college or free medical.
That's right. She's completely right. It's not a question of whether or not we have the money. It is a question of our priorities. And what people want and need and what makes their lives better has never been a priority in recent years of the Republican Party. They have always been the party of the wealthy, and how they have conned blue-collar workers and middle class into thinking that they're for them. That's something P.T. Barnum would have loved to have been able to do, con people that completely. Mary, I got to get to a commercial break. Thank you so much for the call. Appreciate it. We will be right back after this.
If you've missed any of today's show, you can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Amazon, or HeartlandSignal.com. Just search for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Still struggling with gas, bloat, constipation, nausea, or diarrhea? Have you tried eliminating foods but felt no change? It's time to call the tummy whisperer, Renee Barish at Digestive Health Solutions. Renee uses targeted testing to reveal exactly what's happening in your gut. Gut bacteria plays a key role in all your body functions, from cardiovascular regulation to brain function. When the gut is imbalanced, you may experience symptoms that extend beyond the gut, such as anxiety, skin issues, poor sleep, or increased risk for disease. Digestive Health Solution uses advanced testing to identify harmful microbes and evaluate the overall balance of the gut ecosystem. Get insights into your health, digestion, and how your microbiome affects all aspects of your body. Stop suffering. Call Renee now at 847-207-2034 or visit thetummywhisperer.com. That number is 847-207-2034. Let's get you feeling better. The Tummy Whisperer.
Hey Google, play WCPT.
Streaming Chicago's progressive talk from TuneIn.
Want to join the conversation?
I'm going to say exactly what I think here.
Got something to say?
Everyone needs to hear what I got to say.
Call Joan now at 773-763-9278 and join the conversation. Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive on Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820.
We are trying to get in all the callers. I will try to start taking callers earlier. Okay, I've gotten a little chatty at the beginning of the show, and I will do my best to rein that in. Let's go to Marty, who is on the line from Chicago. Hi, Marty.
Hey, Joan. Happy Wednesday. Thanks for taking my call. I just wanted to point out how ironic it was that President Trump signed all of those executive orders that he did on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And his first executive order was basically like revoking he states in the first one, I think it was some 4 or 5, that he wants to end diversity and equity programs, and then list all of the Biden initiatives that he revoked. And I mean, some of these executive orders are just nuts. Like there were 24 of them, and a lot of them target diversity and equity programs. Of course, trying to reframe the 14th Amendment and renaming Mount McKinley. Not a single one of these things does anything to help the average American person, and the only thing that I saw that affects the price of anything is him ending the cap that the Biden administration had negotiated on generic Medicaid prescriptions. So he's already raising prices on things that I kind of compiled all this and wrote about it, but. And
not only did he start on Inauguration Day, Martin Luther King Day, but he has continued those efforts. You probably saw it was reported this morning that if you are a government worker and your job has anything to do with DEI programs or anything to do with DEI, you have, as of today, been laid off with pay. And the belief is that those people will not be working, certainly not in those jobs, but maybe not for the government at all much longer. But anybody who works for the government and has had anything to do with DEI is now out of a job, been laid off. So far, laid off with pay. But that ain't going to last.
Well, yeah, and it's going to have a chilling effect. I mean, it's going to, it was just the wrong, most ironic way to completely disgrace, Dr. King's legacy, which was about, inclusion and empowerment. But yeah, I think I wrote the title of my blog post was "An Inaugural Betrayal," and I was it was just, pretty fitting.
Yes. Thank you, Marty. Thank you for the call today. Let's go to our good friend Earl, who is calling in from Hyde Park. Hey, Earl, how are you?
Hi, Joan. How are you?
I'm
Can you hear
okay.
me?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm okay, too, but I'm not very happy. But the reason why I called in was, you know, how you were reflecting on the police and how they might have felt, you know, taken advantage of or let down by the fact that he released all those criminals, and they are criminals, the ones that were convicted. I don't think it's going to bother them that much. I'm sure they'll leave a bad taste, but they're not going to abandon the Republican Party, and they're not going to abandon him. Because for a long time, we've always seen that the Republicans have managed to coerce their voters into voting against their own interests and supporting policies that, you know, help the rich and benefit them, you know, cultural issues. And it's kind of sad to say, but I really don't believe the police department sees the Democratic Party as a place to run to or being an independent. So I believe they're really going to stay with the Republican Party, even though Trump has, you know, maybe stabbed them in the back a little bit, you know. But
oh, yeah, and just as, you know, Earl, the same is true for union workers. I mean, union rank and file did not come out in droves to support Kamala. It is believed that the rank and file members of various unions were also big Trump supporters. And, you know, we didn't know for sure he was going to, well, he said he was going to, so we kind of had a clue that he was going to pardon all these violent rioters. But the union people, they should have known. I mean, this is a guy who's complimenting Elon Musk on the fact that there are no unions at Tesla and that if anybody complains, he fires them. And isn't that great? And wouldn't it be great if everybody could work that way? In what universe does that square with being a union member? It's just, you're absolutely right. The Republican Party has convinced people to vote against their own self-interest. And, yeah. And it makes me sad.
You know, it's kind of sad, though, but it's really sad. But I'm going to reflect on one other thing that you mentioned, and that is the reason why we haven't had rich Democratic donors invest in, you know, radio stations and across the heartland. They see it as a no-win-in situation, and they don't see that as a profit, something as a profit in enterprise. So, you know, invest in it. But Rupert Murdoch and others invest in it because they look at a long-term proposition where they are getting conversions.
Well,
and once they
you're
have the
absolutely
conversions,
right.
they got the
This didn't happen overnight. I mean, Fox Cable debuted, I believe it was 1996. And at the time it debuted, it was very small, didn't have much audience, and was kind of considered a sort of a joke. Well, it isn't a joke anymore. It really is not. And, you know, just it's unfortunate that we don't have as many billionaires as they do. And it's unfortunate that some of our billionaires decide that, you know, I mean, if you're a billionaire and you are going to give away money, God knows it's your right. I mean, if you want to put it in a big basket and burn it, that's your right. But, you know, I see Mackenzie Scott, Jeff Bezos' ex-wife. I wish to God she'd call her husband up and say, you know what, the Washington Post is dragging you down. Let me take it over. Let me do it. She's got as much money as he does. Why isn't she stepping up? You know, I think it's great that she gives money to a bunch of organizations. But, you know, sometimes you really want to have a bigger impact than a little bit here and a little bit there. I think when you've got that kind of money, you need to go big. But anyway, I got to wrap it up, Earl. I want to squeeze in another caller before we have to go to news. Thanks for the call. Let's go to our good friend Ron, who is calling in from Chicago.
Yes,
Yesterday, Trump was asked about the pardons for the January 6th rioters, and first he was talking nonsense about how the Democrats burned the January 6th report, whatever that was, and then he started talking about how President Biden pardoned his relatives. And I don't think any of President Biden's relatives ever hit a policeman over the head with a fire extinguisher.
Or we hit him with a cattle prod, or tased them, or stabbed them with the pole that used to carry an American flag. No, I don't think anybody Joe Biden pardoned was violent. You're absolutely right.
And all those that were pardoned, they can now legally own a gun, which is kind of...
Yeah, that's why people are saying he's creating his own paramilitary force. And the word is, if you commit violence on behalf of Donald Trump, that's okay. That is okay. You don't have to worry. Donald Trump will take care of you.
Right. And one more thing. If I move to Mars, do I still have to pay my student loan?
If you move where?
To Mars.
To Mars? That's a good question. If Elon Musk offers people debt forgiveness if you move to Mars, I bet he could fill several spaceships. I bet he could. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron. Appreciate it. We are going to take a break for news, and when we come back, we are going to start talking to a bunch of really interesting people today. We're going to talk about immigration. We're going to talk about Elon Musk and whether or not we believe that was a Nazi salute. And frankly, if we should, can we hate him any more than we already do? I don't think so. All right, let's take a break for news. We'll be back with more after this.
Remember when you get to work to hop over to WCPT820.com or the TuneIn Radio app and stream The Stephanie Miller Show. Weekdays 8 to 11 a.m. on Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter. WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter.
Time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Joan, as always, exceptional work from you from, your TV days all the way up to the day. You're truly exceptional, and thanks for this great show you have.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
I am very pleased to welcome back to our program legal expert Lisa Graves. Lisa is the founder and executive director of True North, a national investigative watchdog group. She also is the host of the podcast Grave Injustice. She looks at ways that rights and freedoms are coming under attack. She is an expert on the shenanigans of courts, especially the Supreme Court. Lisa, how are you today?
Oh, my goodness. Thank you so much for having me on, Joan. It's a delight to be on your show, regardless of what's happening in the world. So thank you for inviting me.
I use the word shenanigans, but I don't want to make light of your reporting and your podcast. It's just that if I don't take things a little bit light once in a while, I think I will begin screaming, and I'm not sure I'll be able to stop, Lisa. So it is my coping. It is my coping mechanism. So what are you? I want to know what you have planned in the near future. There seems to be a rich field of reporting when it comes to the Supreme Court. But talk to us about your most recent podcasts.
Oh, sure. We launched a new program with Midas Touch called Legal AF on YouTube. And so we've been doing, me and my colleagues and I have been doing some on-the-spot analysis of what's been going on over the last couple of months. And in addition to the podcast that you mentioned, the Grave Injustice podcast, but Legal AF is where we've been talking about what's been going on with the courts, what's been going on with this inauguration. And one of the things that I thought was really I suppose interesting, although interesting again is, as you suggested, Joan, a light way of putting it. But, on Monday, those who tuned in saw Donald Trump take an oath of office administered by John Roberts. But that oath is really, even though the words were the same, the meaning is so different because this U.S. Supreme Court, under John Roberts, in a partisan decision last year, gave Trump immunity from criminal prosecution for anything that he claims is an official act or the words that relate to an official act. And so what the oath means, I think, is really up for question. What does it mean to take an oath to faithfully execute the laws when the person giving you the oath, John Roberts, has just orchestrated an unprecedented ruling by the Supreme Court saying that the president cannot, through his actions, break the laws, that he's immune from prosecution. And so that's one of the things I've been focusing on is, we're in a whole new territory now due to this interventionist, activist Supreme Court that, is surrounded with a cloud of corruption and I think is really out of control.
Yeah. Jonathan Last wrote something. I saw it today. He wrote it recently. I don't know if he just wrote it today. Jonathan Last of The Bulwark wrote that Democrats have one job, and that is to remind the public of the worst of what Donald Trump is doing, like starting with maybe some screenshots of some of the violent racists with their horrific T-shirts, their anti-Jewish, anti-everything T-shirts, and those should be posted and reposted, and just people should be reminded, this guy, beat up a cop, he's anti-Semitic, and Donald Trump just gave him a pardon. And Jonathan Last's argument is if Democrats can bring down Donald Trump's popularity in the polls, that will influence how, at least, maybe not Clarence Thomas, but it might influence how John Roberts rules on some of these cases about things that are being done by the administration, some of their executive orders, et cetera, and so forth. A lot of these are going to be bubbling up to the Supreme Court. And Jonathan Last's argument is that if Donald Trump is only slightly unpopular, John Roberts might be afraid to take a bold move. But if Donald Trump by then is wildly unpopular in the polls, John Roberts might actually discover he has a spine. What do you think about that? You know John Roberts. You study him.
I study him quite a bit. I think that is a strategy that is worth pursuing in terms of making sure that people understand what just happened and the consequences. That the people who have been released on Trump's, mass pardon include people who engaged in terrible violence against Capitol Police, attacked, our Capitol building, attacked, the personnel who were trying to protect the orderly transition of government to make sure that our votes were counted in the 2020 election. And some of them were sentenced to very lengthy terms because of their role in insurrection. Some of them have, a history of violence or a history of planning, sort of paramilitary types of activities. And so it really is appalling and horrifying that these individuals who were duly indicted by a grand jury, who were convicted by juries or pleaded guilty for their crimes, have been released, including, people like Enrico Tarrio and others who, have really, I think now may feel like they can act with impunity from Trump. And so I definitely agree that the American people need to understand who these people are that Trump pardoned and the crimes that they committed. Some of them admitted those crimes directly. Only a few of them expressed remorse for them. And I think it's truly dangerous. In terms of John Roberts, it's certainly the case that he reads the headlines and reads the news. And so it's possible that if Trump's policies were perceived as unpopular, that could influence him. My hesitation is that when you look at what happened last year, what you have is John Roberts himself orchestrating, making sure that Donald Trump is on the ballot in Colorado, even though the 14th Amendment plainly says that the only way that an insurrectionist can appear on the ballot is if a supermajority in Congress removes that bar. And similarly, John Roberts orchestrated the immunity decision, which was a 6-3 decision of Republican appointees in the majority, asserting just unprecedented, never before issued or ordered or anywhere in the Constitution, the idea that a president has immunity for crimes. In fact, the Constitution in 2 different places expressly says that the president has a particular duty, and that duty is to faithfully execute the laws. And nothing could be more opposite to faithfully execute the laws than breaking them, breaking criminal laws. And now you have Trump, who has basically given this impunity to people who were affirmatively convicted of crimes, including crimes of violence. And so I just think, I think we have a lot of work to do together to make sure the American people understand what's at stake and what's unfolding, and that's part of the equation. I am concerned that John Roberts is continuing to play ball for his side, not be the fair umpire calling balls and strikes that he claimed to the American people in 2005, but actually a partisan player, as his actions last year demonstrate.
Well, that seems to be the consensus that we have with Clarence Thomas and with Alito and Kavanaugh, et cetera, and so forth, that we no longer have an honorable Supreme Court. We have partisans. We have people who have their thumb on the scale of justice, and they're appointed for life. It's virtually impossible to get rid of them. So really, what do they care, Lisa? What you think, or what you talk about in Legal AF or in Grave Injustice? What do they care what I say? What do they care about any publicity?
Well, I got 2 answers to that, and then a follow-on. But the first one is that, John Roberts actually gave an interview a couple of years after he was confirmed, in which he said on C-SPAN that if the American people don't agree with his decisions, it's more or less too bad. That was his quote. It's just more or less too bad. So he already, indicated from the start that he is not concerned with how people respond to the rulings, that he has this power and he's going to exert it. And in fact, he got away with a whole trail of very partisan rulings, including undermining the historic landmark Voting Rights Act and more. And it's only recently, really, since the Dobbs decision and since those amazing investigative reporters started looking into the court, that the public has finally seen him for who he is. However, on the other hand, the second point is, in his year-end statement, Roberts had the audacity to try to equate criticism with the court with terrorism and threats of violence against the court. It was really appalling, and it was a fundamentally sort of authoritarian approach to his year-end statement, rather than actually recognize the legitimacy of the criticism that people have expressed about the fact that this court is not following any ethical rules, that the documentation shows, for example, that Clarence Thomas has taken more than $10 million worth of gifts, that the sort of free-for-all of being at the billionaire largesse is out of control. And it's not just billionaires, it's people who do have an agenda before the court, who have a political agenda that these justices are ruling in favor of. And then for Roberts to basically discount that reporting, as he, last year and the year before, did everything he could to stop an actual binding ethical code from being adopted by Congress. I just think it shows that he is really out of touch, and that he has authoritarian tendencies, quite frankly, to try to make that equation of legitimate dissent in a free society, including a criticism of the court that is well-founded. And instead of taking that seriously, he sought to minimize it. And I guess the last thing I would just say on that point is, it does matter, though. What we say and what we do does matter, because we need to build a movement for reform for when there is an opportunity, when there's a receptive Congress and a president in place to reform this court, or we'll be stuck with this out-of-control court issuing repressive decisions, issuing regressive decisions, repealing legal precedents and our rights until we curb it, until we reform it. And so all this work up to now and in the coming years needs to be put toward actually reclaiming our rights that this Roberts Court, has sought to destroy.
Yeah, I want to talk to you more about that point. I'm talking to Lisa Graves. She's a legal expert. She hosts the podcast Grave Injustice. She also has a YouTube channel with our friends from the Midas Touch where it's called Legal AF. We'll be back with more after this.
Take Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, with you on the go by using the TuneIn app on your phone. Just search for WCPT 820. Choose Views with Richard Chew.
Right now, what we definitely have to agree on is that we have to stay connected and we have to fight forward together. My life's work has proven to me, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that when we do come together and we fight together to move forward rather than fighting against each other, that we get stuff done. And it sticks and it's lasting.
Richard Chew, weekday mornings at 6 on WCPT 820.
This is WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
And I'm joined by Lisa Graves. Her podcast is Grave Injustice. She has a new YouTube show, Legal AF. Lisa, you do this YouTube show, but isn't it also available as a podcast?
It has audio as well, but it's primarily I think on YouTube visually, and we're also thinking about other other ways to pursue that, like perhaps having another capsule of that Grave Injustice podcast or another capsule that has an audio only piece. Sorry for the jargon there. But the YouTube channel is where we primarily exist with Legal AF, but we're working on expanding that. Yep.
The world of reaching people with good information seems to have fallen largely on independent creators more so than mainstream outlets. And I'm always curious as to, like, for instance, are you on Blue Sky?
I am. I'm the Lisa Graves on Blue Sky. I did abandon Twitter or X a couple months ago.
Yeah, I did too. And now I'm debating about whether or not I now have to get off of Threads and Instagram and Facebook.
Me too.
Yeah. I actually, if anybody looks me up, you might be confused because there are two accounts for me. When Blue Sky was just getting off the ground, when you had to actually be invited to join, I got an invite and set up an account. And it didn't seem, at that time, Twitter was providing me with a lot more information for my show. So I didn't do anything with it. And now that it's taken off, I can't remember any of those passwords, kids. I can't remember how to get back into that account. Yeah, that's embarrassing. And apparently I didn't write them down. So I created a new Blue Sky account. And one is Joan Esposito. That's the good one. The other one, Joan Esposito, CHI. Well, that's just a sad account. But, Blue Sky seems to be where people with, not solely, but a lot of people with a more democratic point of view who really care about this country, they seem to be gravitating toward that site. And I know this is technically beyond me, but apparently you can also broadcast live on Blue Sky. How did you guys, because, Midas Touch, they are very, very savvy when it comes to media. How did you decide where to put this new show? Where do you think people are going to be most receptive to the kinds of messages you have and I have?
Well, I think Blue Sky is a really great new opportunity because X has just been so flooded with garbage and deceptive information. Like my feed on Twitter/X was just filled with right-wing nonsense that I never followed, that I requested. And so it's just refreshing to have a stream of information coming through on Blue Sky from people who I trust, from outlets that I believe in. And so that's been just refreshing compared to all the just nonsense that I was seeing on X. But we were, my colleague Alex Aronson, who with whom I co-lead Court Accountability, we were approached by Michael Popak, who's been part of Midas Touch, and he said that he really appreciated our work on court reform and our voices and expertise, and asked us if we'd be interested in joining them on this show on YouTube. And it launched just a few weeks before the election, and it's with the help of Midas Touch, it's just been going just wonderfully. I think we have over 400,000 followers on YouTube in just that period, which is tremendous. And it reminds me a little bit of the early days of Facebook, where you could actually add followers to your organization, and people started following you. And then I think that I don't know if I won't say this term on an FCC broadcast, but there's this term for the in-Xification. Social media.
Yes. In poopification, I believe the term is. It's something like poopification.
Yes, the poopification of social media sites, where they start out as this useful tool for connecting people, and then they get monetized, and the people who, are getting really rich from them, like Zuckerberg and others, basically change the algorithms to drive advertising or drive content that fuels their fortunes, and not the content that people ask or seek. But right now, YouTube and Blue Sky are operating, I think, predominantly really as fair dealers in terms of people getting access to the content that they want, rather than being fed, other than, advertisements, just general advertisements on YouTube. You choose the things you see, and I think that that's still a really powerful component of social media. So we have to use the sites that have not been poopified, polluted by that. At a certain point, that was early 2010s. It just became clear that Facebook was throttling access to people who were following our content, and that we would have to pay to reach them, and even then would not be able to reach most of the people who had actually signed up for my previous organization, Center for Media Democracy and PR Watch. So, it's exciting to see what Midas Touch has done and the community that they've grown, and it's really exciting to see Blue Sky. And like you, I definitely am thinking about, really, really strongly considering leaving Facebook.
Yeah. Me as well. That sound you heard pop up, I was actually pulling up Legal AF, and I didn't realize that I had my microphone on. So I got to hear, how do you say his name, Michael Popak?
Yes. Yeah, he's terrific. He's amazing.
He interrupted you, not me.
I'll tell him. But I was going to say, Joan, one of my great regrets from a business sort of standpoint is that one of my friends reached out to me in 2007 to say I should get on Twitter. It's going to be this new thing, and I was like, who wants to hear someone, write a thought while they're standing in line for coffee? And that's why I'm the Lisa Graves and not Lisa Graves, because I completely did not realize what a juggernaut that sort of social media interaction would be. And it's been so useful, actually, over time for reaching reporters and for reporters also to get stories out into the world. Yeah.
Well, that's, to me, one of the things that I use Blue Sky and, frankly, even to some degree, Instagram for, is a lot of politicians I admire have channels, and like AOC. Talk about somebody who's savvy to social media. She uses it brilliantly to get her thoughts on an issue or her message or announcing a bill. She does that brilliantly. So in the time we have left, I'm very nervous. This Supreme Court makes me very, very nervous. Maybe in the Biden era, I was still worried, but not as nervous as I am now with Donald Trump back in the White House. What is the one thing that you're worried the Supreme Court will do in the upcoming year?
Well, I'm very concerned based on the decisions the Roberts Court issued during the first Trump administration that it will ratify Trump's assertion of emergency powers. In general, Historically, the court is at its weakest when a president asserts emergency powers, but those emergency powers in the past have been asserted only in actual emergencies, like World War II and, steel production, for example, not asserted on the manufacture of emergencies that aren't actually real emergencies. And so I'm concerned that this Roberts Court is so partisan that it will go along with it. I'm also really worried about the citizenship of people who are born in the United States and this idea that Trump thinks that he can transgress the 14th Amendment and unilaterally declare people who are born here not to be citizens, despite the plain language of the Constitution, which says that in the very first sentence of the 14th Amendment couldn't be plainer. And yet, because John Roberts basically mooted out key language in another part of the 14th Amendment regarding the bar for insurrectionists being able to hold office, I'm concerned that none of that text seems binding on John Roberts. We'll see what they do, but I'm concerned that this court has basically sort of jumped the shark and has revealed itself to be a partisan lever in aid of Trump, and I'm worried that it will ratify his most extreme policies. I hope that's not true, but that is my worry.
Yeah, and I think it's a worry that many of us share. Lisa Graves, you can hear her. There are issues of grave injustice that are still available where you get your podcasts. You can also now hear her as a part of the Midas Touch Legal AF on YouTube. Lisa, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Joan, a joy to be on your show, and I look forward to many more conversations, hopefully as we make some progress despite the odds.
Yes, I'd like that. I'd like both of those things to happen. Thank you, Lisa. We are going to take a break, and when we come back, we are going to talk to Associate Professor of Political Science, Dr. Rachel Cobb, right after this.
Podcasts of Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, YouTube, and Amazon. Just search for Joan Esposito.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm joined now by Dr. Rachel Cobb, who's an associate professor in the Political Science and Legal Studies Department at Suffolk University. She is an expert on things like voting patterns, political participation in general, demographics, all of that. Dr. Cobb, thank you so much for being here.
Super happy to be here. Thank you, Joan. Hello.
I want to talk to you. I know that you have already been looking at the data from this last election and breaking it down, and I want to talk to you about each and every one of these categories if we have time. Let's start with white voter support for Trump.
Yes. So overall, let's just say it plainly, whites supported Trump. And it was 62% of white voters earning less than $50,000 voted for Trump. So one of the things we look at is kind of how does it break down if we're looking at one racial category, how does it break down by income? Mm-hmm. Certainly, so overall, 57% of white voters and 5% of black voters supported Trump. But when we break it down a little bit more, we see movement within these areas. What's interesting is that, so overall, Trump won the working class, which, is defined in a lot of different ways depending on who you're speaking to. But if we're just looking at people without a college degree, by all races, he won that group by 12 points. On the other hand, union voters voted for Harris more than they voted for Biden. So some of the gains for labor were actually reflected in the voting patterns that happened in the 2024 election.
I'm really interested that you're reporting that, because from what little I have read about it, I was concerned that a lot of rank and file union went for Trump. And I don't know specific numbers, but I'm glad to hear that Joe Biden's support of unions and creation of union jobs, it seems to have had an impact, would you say?
It had an impact on that particular population, which we know is, overall a smaller population than the electorate at large. But it is an informed population, and one of the key roles, as we know, that unions play is providing information to their members. And this is one of the key things about groups in American politics and why they're so important, because if you identify with that group and that group is providing key information to you, you hear it from them in a way that you don't necessarily, or you hear it differently from other organizations that are coming at you.
I want to talk to you about a group that seems to have emerged as an important factor in this last election, and that is Latino men. When you looked at demographically at the vote, did you break out men, or did you just look at the Latino community as a whole?
Well, the Latino community as a whole, but I'll tell you, this is one of those things that is that scholars are working on how we define Latinos and how Latinos define themselves, whether they identify as Latinos themselves or whether they identify as Americans. We do know that conservative Latinos and those favoring anti-immigration views showed the most significant shift towards Trump. And Catholic Latinos preferred him for his anti-abortion stance. And essentially, low-income, less-educated Latinos increased their support for Trump, although class seemed to be less influential in its ways. But this is one of those groups that, people are seeing moving over time with more support going towards the Republican Party. They had 30 to 35% in the 2020 election, and now up to 43% voting Republican in the 2024 election. So that was a movement. And what people are starting to say is that essentially both parties now have, each of them actually has a multi-ethnic coalition. The Republicans have a multi-ethnic coalition. The Democrats have a multi-ethnic coalition. But the Democratic multi-ethnic coalition is a little bit more, multi-ethnic. But they're on the left, sort of more united by racial progress, and on the right, united essentially in opposition to that vision. So it's a fascinating set of things that are happening along as racial and ethnic lines in this country, but it's sort of it's like the Americanization of groups who now are joining the party coalitions, and identities are fluid, as we know, and some fade and some rise.
Really interesting, and I know that it has been widely speculated that Latinos may be as a group more Catholic than other groups, and that might have played a role, as you mentioned, with the abortion issue. But there was also, I read, and I don't have any idea if this is quantifiable in any way. Donald Trump really in this last election, or at least his younger supporters, sort of created this whole idea that somehow he was a macho man. There was this what's been described by Anthony Scaramucci, who knew him well, as this hyper masculinity that he projects. Is there any way that data can tell us if that sort of attitude played a role in the election?
Well, absolutely, data can tell us that. And, I have to say, on a slightly irrelevant but interesting thing today, it sort of crossed my desk that there's a new working paper about boys around the world, but boys apparently in Norway are more ideologically polarized than ever, and even in Norway, there's an anti-feminist kind of view and a growing masculinity, so this may not be even unique to the United States. But certainly what we are seeing in survey evidence and from other kinds of work being done to look at public opinion is that views on masculinity are, especially among men, as you said, hardening in some ways, and the view of what it means to be a man, Trump is defining now for a generation of young men.
I've been reading more and more about this. You know, somebody, a friend of mine, shared with me a few weeks ago an article where they were analyzing college admission and admission to certain majors. And the conclusion for that article was, the more women are attracted to a profession, the fewer, over time, the fewer men apply. They cited applications to veterinarian school and how over the last couple of decades, there's been this shift from mostly men, a few women, and then it was like more women and a little, and now it's to the point where applications to veterinarian school, the majority are from women. The article was also analyzing college admissions and who applies to college. And, it seems like as college becomes more of an opportunity for women and something they care about, it becomes less popular with men. What the heck is that? What on God's earth is that? Please explain it to me.
Well, I wish this were my area of study. I cannot explain why that happens, but certainly I am aware of these observations, and they happen across the board in the professions. I was also thinking of pediatricians, for example. I mean, there's the other piece of this is that the wages in those professions, as the women gain more traction, the wages tend to go down. So there's that piece too. But I think, at the college level, it is the kind of this is where I am not the expert on this. I do not know exactly what is happening, but we do know that girls are essentially are doing well in grade school, and some of the things that they bring to the table are valued by the education system, and there clearly is a struggle right now with how to raise and educate our young men. Colleges are interested in attracting these young men because they, of course, are interested in enrollment. And so this is a challenge for our society writ large, that it is really important to have everybody going into professions, and that we should not be, segregating essentially by gender in any area, really. But why this is happening, how to address it, we have got to get another team of people here to discuss.
We need to take a break, and I promise when we come back, Dr. Cobb, I will be back on topic. I'm talking to Dr. Rachel Cobb, who's an expert on political participation. We're going to get back on that subject right after this.
You're listening to WCPT 820, because facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Every weekday afternoon from 2 to 5 p.m. on WCPT 820.
With me is Dr. Rachel Cobb, who's assistant professor of political science and legal studies at Suffolk University, who specializes in voting patterns and demographics, political participation. One of the things I wanted to be, before we move off of how various demographic groups voted, I want to talk about youth voting, because, I have studied the demographics of the elections I've covered over the years. And one thing that almost always surprises me is the low turnout among younger voters. There have been the rare exceptions, but the rule seems to be not so much. What did you find out about this last election?
Well, it went down. The youth vote went down. People were so excited because we saw these gains essentially from Obama on forward of youth voting more and more and more, and 50%, over 50% in 2020, but it went down in 2024 by about 8%. And, part of the big picture about why young people don't vote is, first of all, like with any of these things, it's complicated. But it is the barriers to voting that exist are especially hard on young people because they are more mobile. They are new to the process. I work with these young people every day. They are nervous about voting, even when they grew up in households where they routinely went to vote with their parents and had essentially all of the advantages. The idea of voting for them is still, it's a new thing. And anytime we do a new thing, we may be excited, but we're also a little nervous about how people are going to respond to us, what they're going to think, all of those things. But we do know, what the barriers in general to participation. The first major one is registering to vote. That first of all, in many states, there's a deadline that you have to register by. That's a barrier unto itself. Filling out that form. There are a lot of states that have websites where you can do an online voter registration form. But if you don't have a driver's license, then you usually have to print out that form, and sometimes you have to fold it and put it in an envelope and send it. And I say this lovingly. I was with a young person this past fall who, when I said, and now just put it in an envelope and put a stamp on it, and that person said to me, "What's a stamp?"
Oh, no. Oh, God, no.
Yeah. So that's what we're dealing with. And of course this person didn't know what a stamp was, never had to use one. And we don't see post offices everywhere. We're not seeing, so this is a whole new world, and that into itself, so that even that you have to print it out and mail it, that's a barrier.
Wow.
And then the next piece is, well, you have to find your polling location. But one of the things I talk about with my students is, how do you even know that the word polling location, what is that? That's a vocabulary word that is not part of our normal, parlance on a everyday basis. And for sure, people confuse the word poll, take a poll in a survey, so we know what the polls say, versus a telephone poll versus a polling location. And that we sort of expect people to know this stuff osmotically, but they don't. And our high schools are not necessarily teaching civics. And even when they are teaching civics, sometimes they do these wonderful civics projects and students learn about lots of great things, but these kind of basic stuff, they're not necessarily learning. So there's a lot of things that are sort of the hidden curriculum of voting that is very challenging for young people. And then, of course, the voter ID requirements. Do they have a driver's license? Does the state require an ID? I mean, I could go on and on and on, and I am happy to. But these are all challenges, and that my main point is that it's magnified for young people. So getting them over that hurdle is even more work than getting somebody who is an occasional voter.
I noticed on the stats that you reported when you were writing about barriers to voting that 48% reported little to no information about voting. Is that what you're talking about? Not about the candidates, but about just the actual process?
Exactly. That is precisely what I'm talking about, that they feel disconnected because all of this is like a world that they are not part of and they're not invited into. In fact, one of the things that always frustrates me, I have the benefit of bringing wonderful people in to talk with my students who are politicians themselves, and they're great. But, sometimes the students say, hey, you don't care about my issues. And the retort is, well, guess what? You don't vote. That is it's like the students making them feel bad for something rather than saying, hey, part of the political process is that we talk about the issues that our voters care about. We need you to vote, and let me show you how.
Mm-hmm.
So this kind of reframing of it, blame and shame, rather than I know that you're sincerely confused about this and I want to help you.
Wow.
And I feel so much of what we do to our young people is make them feel bad about what they don't know. And, I can understand them feeling alienated and disconnected. I'm like, well, if you don't care about me, why should I care?
I will admit, several years ago, maybe putting my children in a position where they were going to embarrass themselves. I actually have a rotary phone, and I got it out and I put it in front of them and I said, how do you think you use this? And they looked at it and they looked at it and they could see numbers and they could see these little holes. And they looked at it and they were like, I don't know. How would you make a call with this? And I was like, give me your finger. And I said, you want a 7? You put it in the 7 hole. And then you turn it. And then you let it go. And I, of course, found this absolutely hilarious. I simply reinforced the thought amongst both my adult children that I'm an absolute dinosaur, that I actually lived at a time when these things were useful. But, I know that people like me who were reporting on this election, we really thought, even if old fogies like me still, vote more conservatively, I really thought the young people are going to save us. This is the election. They've lost their rights, their medical autonomy. There's so many other things they grew up with that now appear in danger. This is the election. The young people will turn out in vast numbers, and they will make the difference. Why did that not happen?
Well, I think it comes back to that they were as concerned as sort of the average voter writ large about what James Carville would say, it's the economy, stupid. And so it was economic messages and their very economic insecurity that propelled them, along with everyone else, to vote their pocketbooks. And then, of course, what they were hearing about what was causing it, whether that is true or not is the other discussion. But they were concerned about jobs and inflation and all of those other things. Not all of them are going to college, of course, so it's a different group that was benefiting from Biden's discussion about loan forgiveness. But they are facing this insecure world, and Trump was certainly presenting an economic story, tying all kinds of things together, inflation to immigration to crime, and essentially exploiting those economic stories to the advantage. And we had an election in which we had an unpopular president in a party that's an incumbent, and also a president who was very old, and these two very old people going at it. Even so, Harris made huge gains when she came in and really shifted the playing field, but it was not a good playing field to start. And so but she didn't make it to the finish line. And I don't know. I mean, would it have been different had Biden dropped out sooner? I know from my own kids who, they grew up with a every political mother. So it is not that we're not talking about it. They're the difference that they experienced. They were just so not excited about the election prior to July at all.
Wow.
Not engaged. Not engaged. And I was the old folks saying, like, you got to think about this.
One of the big topics has been a historical shift in who supports which party. Democrats have been decrying the fact that even though they try to enact laws and policies that will benefit working people, it seems that those working people would rather vote Republican. What do you see from the data about any historical shifts in party support?
I actually, on this one, I think it is, if you were forgetting everything and just saying, hey, at a time when there's rising inflation and an unpopular incumbent, is that person likely to win? The answer is no. So I sort of think in many ways it's not really a shift. It's highly predictable.
Huh.
Now, the thing that is different is this is a very different kind of set of promises and set of rights, and all of the things that shaped this election were so big and bigger than just the economy. But at the end of the day, I think the outcome in that sense was what it was. So there are some people who are saying actually Democrats don't really shift your strategy too much because you might pivot too far in another direction that really you would have been fine had you not had the inflation and the unpopular incumbent.
And even though Joe Biden didn't engender any kind of excitement, Kamala Harris was viewed as a much more charismatic, shall we say, candidate. Yep. Do you think you sort of touched on this a little bit about the idea of would she have done better if she'd had more time? But if you looked into this kind of data, I suspect that if she had been a white man, we would have a Democratic president, as opposed to not only, God forbid, a woman, but a woman of color. Whew! I just don't think we're there yet.
And I know a lot of people who see it that way, too. And I have to say, I mean, this is like just my gut and what I think. This is not grounded in running all kinds of scenarios to see what would have happened. My thinking is, first of all, she did move the needle. She moved the needle a lot. There was a white man who wasn't popular, and then she kind of electrified things, and a lot of people moved to her. Would it have been different had a white man, would a younger white man been able to move the needle even farther? Maybe. But the other piece of it is, would that have alienated women more so than they might have been otherwise? So it's a toughie to know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right.
I think, yeah. So one positive spin here is she did a lot. Again, she didn't make it to.
She did an awful lot in a very short amount of time. Speaking of time, we are up against news at the top of the hour. Thank you, Dr. Rachel Cobb, Associate Professor of Political Science and Legal Studies at Suffolk University. Thank you for being here. This has been very interesting.
It was a treat. Thank you very much.
We are going to take a break for news. We're going to be back with more after this.
The Thom Hartmann radio program provides all of the intelligence, information, and insight you'll need to win the water cooler wars. Weekdays 11 to 2 right here on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter. Alexa, play WCPT.
WCPT from TuneIn.
It's time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
I want somebody who's passionate. I want somebody who can talk to people like a real person, who can make people feel things, who can make people want to follow them.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
I am very pleased to be joined by someone who we will be talking to quite a bit in the next few years. Fred Sau is here. He's the policy director at Illinois' Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights. Well, Fred, these are days we thought wouldn't happen. How are you coping?
Hello again, Joan. I'm happy to be back on the air again with you, and unfortunately, this is the occasion that we have to be on here. I'm holding up okay, all things considered.
I'm glad to hear it. I'm sure you're aware, the Washington Post is reporting this afternoon that not only has Donald Trump shut off any access to asylum, he's announced plans to send 10,000 troops to the border. What's that? Yeah. How's that going to play out?
Yeah, that's going to be really interesting. I think the last times that National Guard troops have been deployed in the border, they were looking for things to do. So it kind of leads me to wonder what all these troops are going to be doing once they're on the border. And mind you, there are restrictions on what the military can do so far as civil domestic law enforcement. So there may even be questions as to what kind of activities these troops may be able to even engage in. So lots and lots of questions there.
Donald Trump is very good at photo ops. Is it possible that this is going to be more of a photo op than anything else, or is that just my wishful thinking?
Well, Joan, you are correct in that the new White House occupant is very good at creating spectacle and drawing attention to themselves in order to make a point, and much of that point being promoting himself. There would probably be far few better ways for him to promote himself than to be standing in front of armed troops at the border defending America from people who he refers to as invaders, even though they're not invaders. I wouldn't put it past them. I should note here that, yes, border crossings did surge about a year ago, but they've been way, way down. And part of that was policies that were put in place by the Biden administration. Part of that is internal enforcement by Mexico, even enforcement on the part of Panama to stop people from or intercept people as they're trying to cross the Darien Gap. So what could end up happening is that the border crossing numbers go way down, and he claims credit for that, even though this was happening well before he took office.
Yeah. There's also been the announcement that he's instructed the Justice Department to potentially go after mayors or other local officials that somehow get in the way of immigration and get in the way of ICE officers, I guess, maybe Border Patrol officers, finding the people who need to be deported. That seems only marginally reasonable and probably not particularly legal to me, but what do I know?
Yeah, well, first off, I think we need to clarify there is a huge difference between getting in the way and getting out of the way. And, here in Illinois, here in Chicago, we have laws that say, well, the local police are not going to participate in immigration enforcement. We're not going to cooperate. We're not going to, we're not going to hold people, for ICE to pick them up. In my book, that's getting out of the way. Even if this administration tries to make the argument that somehow, some way that state governors, local mayors, local police departments, are somehow violating state law, there is pretty strong legal precedent that that's not the case. Actually, one of the paradoxes is that one of the Supreme Court rulings that said that the federal government cannot bully states and local governments into doing their will arose under Obamacare. Remember, President Obama wanted states to expand Medicaid. I meant Medicaid, not Medicare. And a bunch of states said, a bunch of red states said, no, we're not going to do that. And they sued, and the Supreme Court agreed with them. So, what's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. If states can't be forced to expand their Medicaid programs, states also can't be forced to participate in immigration enforcement.
One of my, at the beginning of the show today, we were talking about immigration, and one of my listeners texted in something that I know that you and I covered in let's just say in a previous life, and that is what do you do if ICE shows up at your front door? What are your legal obligations, and what are your legal protections?
Okay. Well, we did discuss this before, Joan, and the advice. I know.
Here we are again.
So it's super, super important that people know that they have really basic rights. They're guaranteed under the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, and they apply to everybody. Everybody living in the United States has these rights. That includes the rights to be safe and secure in your own home. So it's not as though any law enforcement, whether it's police or ICE or whoever, can just break down your door or barge in. Instead, they need to show a warrant. That warrant needs to be sworn out by a judge, and folks have the perfect right to not open the door, and if the agents say that they have a warrant, they have the right to demand to see the warrant and inspect it and see if it's the right form. And if it's not something that's issued by a court, issued by a judge, then they have the perfect right to keep the door closed. Now, it is super, super important to note that even if you open the door a crack, even if the chain is on, but you open the door, that's inviting the law enforcement officers and the ICE agents to bust in.
Okay. Wait a minute. What if you don't have? They come to the front door and you don't have a screen door. So if you want to find out who's at your front door, you have to open it.
Well, you can ask them to slide it under the door. Usually there's an air gap, under the door. If there's a window, ask them to hold it up to the window, and so that you can take a look.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I didn't realize that. If you have I know this is getting really, really weird, but it's going to get weirder for people. If you have a screen door and you open the door behind it, have you opened the door to them?
I would say that you have, because you're opening up to the interior. Yeah. So it's safer to ask the agents, please slide it under the door, or again, if there's a window off to the side or what have you, hold it up to the window. Let me look at it.
Wow. Fred, I also I want to not just talk to you about how to act if ICE shows up. I want to talk to you about the conversations that you've been having with people and what they're saying to you. Block Club, I think it was Block Club Chicago, was reporting that some people are afraid to go to work because of this new administration and their crackdown. I'm talking to Fred Sau, who's the policy director at Illinois' Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights. We're going to take a break and be back with more after this.
Podcasts of Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, YouTube, and Amazon. Just search for Joan Esposito. You know that you can listen to Chicago's Progressive Talk on WCPT AM 820. Stream us live at WCPT820.com and on the TuneIn radio app. Or you can ask Alexa, Siri, or Google to play WCPT from TuneIn. But now you have another option. We're simulcasting our programming overnight, 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. on WSBC AM 1240 for a clearer reception in and around the city. Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820. And now overnights on WSBC 1240 AM, where facts matter.
Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
And I'm very pleased to be joined by Fred Sau, who is with the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights. We were just talking about, what rights you have if ICE shows up at your house. Since Donald Trump's inauguration, what have you seen? What have you heard? What are people saying to you, Fred?
Yeah, so people in the community are definitely on high alert. Actually, right before I hopped on the phone here, I was talking with one of my coworkers who was cruising down 26th Street yesterday, visiting her grandmother, and it's usually 26th Street is bustling. It's one of the busiest business districts in the city, and yet when she was there yesterday, it was a dead zone. There were no vendors out. People were not taking to the streets, and part of that may have been the cold. Granted, it is hard to be outside consistently, in sub-zero temperatures. But you have to imagine that a lot of it was just not wanting to be outside, wanting to hunker down and be someplace safe. We run a hotline, and I know we've been getting a pretty high volume of calls on the hotline, reporting what people suspect might be ICE fans or other kinds of activity. Fortunately, none of them have panned out yet, as far as we know. That may have changed. Within the past few hours. But this big announcement of Chicago being ground zero, at least for now, has not materialized. Now, that is not to say that they're not, that ICE might still be, they might still be bringing agents in. They might be planning something big, maybe later rather than sooner. There's still a lot of uncertainty here, and that's kind of where we are right now. We're kind of in that in-between zone where we've gotten past the first first 48 hours, but we're not out of it yet.
I thought it was really weird that Donald Trump's immigration czar, and I assume he named him as czar, so he doesn't have to face any kind of confirmation hearings, since czar is a pretty nebulous job. But Tom Homan said, because, I heard the same thing you did, they were going to do this big shock and awe, raids in Chicago. They were going to show them. And then it was reported. And then all of a sudden, Tom Homan is like, well, now that everybody knows about it, we're not going to do it. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, if you had reason to think that there were tons of illegal, undocumented folks that you could sweep in and pick up. If that's true, that hasn't changed. Just because it's been reported in the news, now you're not going to do it? I thought that was a really bizarre response, and that said to me that it was going to be more of a media stunt than an actual raid.
Well, I think you're onto something there, Joan. I have suspected that as well, that this was a lot of bluster to create, anxiety and fear in this community. And, if that was the purpose, well, maybe, unfortunately, perhaps they've achieved their goal. But that said, people are ready to resist. Again, we're doing lots of education to make sure people are in a position to not just know, but also empowered to exercise their rights. And so we're trying to be as ready as we can be. And and it's not just my organization; it's a lot of our allies, it's a lot of elected officials, and other organizations, other groups that are at the ready. And so if there's a silver lining that's come out of this, it's that it's seeing the outpouring of solidarity and willingness to cooperate and people coming forward to volunteer. That's really been wonderful.
Well, that's been on social media, people have been posting, how are you going to get through the next 4 years? And all of the advice I've seen so far is, you've got to be strong, you've got to resist, but you also have to get involved. Somebody was pointing out that, they're expecting to make you afraid. They want to make you silent. And somebody was saying, a lot of people are saying they see things in our country now that were also present when Nazi Germany started to coalesce and rise. And she said the one thing that happened back then is people stayed silent. They were afraid to speak up. They were afraid to take action. And she said that's what's got to be different this time around. And what I've been telling our listeners, because, as you might imagine, being big Kamala and Biden supporters, this election was a tough one for us. But I've been telling people, you can't do everything, but you can do something. And whether it's, find out about an organization like Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, find somebody who's doing work you believe in and work that is quite likely going to be threatened, and support them. Join a lobbying group if need be. Join an activist group if need be, whatever your area of passion is. And you say that you're seeing an uptick in volunteers already?
Well, I've definitely had many people call me, email me, come out of the woodwork to express their support, or even agree to, even offer to, make financial contributions or even organize financial contributions, so that's been really wonderful. I do want to mention one specific thing in one specific way in which people may be able to get involved, and that is, even if you're not directly affected, or particularly if you are privileged enough not to be directly affected, you can still, if you see something, say something. Document what you see. Call it into our hotline. So that we know we are organizing rapid response teams in various parts of the area that can respond on turn on a dime to go to a site where some activity is being reported, check things out, and document as best as we can, and then connect people up with resources. So my colleagues are hard at work putting those teams together. We could always use more volunteers who have the time and inclination to be able to do that. So that's one really concrete way in which in which we can show solidarity.
Yeah. Fred, one thing that made me really sad was reporters talking to people who said that ahead of time they were going to vote for Trump, or afterwards that they did vote for Trump, even though they were immigrants, because, quote, and I can't tell you, Fred, how many times I heard this, I'm a good immigrant. They're not going to come after me. I'm a good immigrant. And I thought to myself, oh, sweetie, oh, sweetie, I am just, my heart breaks for you if you really believe. Even Dick Durbin, I know we have a quote from Dick Durbin, who was on the Senate floor yesterday. He said the executive order signed by President Trump did not target criminals or even those who entered the country without authorization. Instead, they're targeting immigrants who are working legally, though they don't deserve to live in fear every single day that they're going to be a part of this mass deportation. But you and I both know when ICE comes to scoop people up, you know, you think they're going to take people aside and say, excuse me, have you been charged with a crime or have you committed a felony?
Yeah. So, we definitely need to bust out of those kinds of narratives that distinguish people by, you know, the worst thing they ever did or the biggest mistake they ever made or for that matter, how they came to the country. So, you know, people are people, and, you know, all of us are trying to get through our lives and be as productive as we can and raise our families and just live decent lives, and you know, to the extent that you know, some of us make mistakes and some of us have to pay the consequences for those mistakes. But you know, should people continue to be punished or continue to be vulnerable because of those you know those mistakes that we've made? So keeping in mind that you know, our current White House occupant has been convicted of a number of those offenses, and just escaped prosecution for several others. So, you know, be careful where you throw your stones.
Yeah, absolutely. Fred, as this situation evolves, if there's anything that you feel we need to talk about on the radio, please reach out. I try to stay on top of things, but sometimes things that are going on get by me or take me a day or two to figure out. So please reach out. I'll have you on every week. You know, we'll do your own segment. Maybe, you know, what the heck? Maybe we'll just bring you in here and have you host. Whatever it takes, Fred.
Well, yeah, it worked out. It worked out today, Joan. I can't guarantee that it'll work out every single time you ask, but we'll do our best here.
Thanks, Fred.
Always happy to be with you. All right.
Always happy to talk to you. Fred Tsao, Policy Director at the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights. We are going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk with Alani Nassater, who's president at the Jewish United Fund, right after this.
There's no excuse to miss Joan Esposito.
It's number one on my stereo.
Live, local, and progressive. You can listen to her daily at WCPT820.com on your computer or phone.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm joined by Alani Nassater, who's the president at the Jewish United Fund. Lonnie, it has been an eventful 2025. I hope this year gets better for us.
Yes, it has, Joan. Great to be with you, as always.
I wanted to talk to you about the ceasefire and the hostage release, but I'm afraid first we have to talk about this Elon Musk speech where he supposedly 3 times gave what most people are referring to as the Nazi salute. But the Anti-Defamation League came out and made a statement that, while, they may have their problems with Elon Musk, they basically think that he's an awkward man and he made an awkward gesture and They really didn't seem to want to make a big deal about it. They actually got a lot of heat for coming out with that statement. What do you think?
Well, again, this is going to be a period of, I think, again, polarization within our country, which we experienced in 2016 as well, is that, we can expect, unfortunately, politics to really kind of take hold in the next couple of weeks, months, I believe, as, both sides are dug in. And I think that in this situation, I think the best thing for us is to just, ask Mr. Musk what he intended. I think that's the best thing, and let him explain that he wasn't making a salute or he was making a salute. If he was making a salute, then it's obviously incredibly inappropriate, incendiary, and wrong message to send to the country at a time when we're all hoping for the country to come together and heal, rather than doing something as divisive as a Nazi salute. As for the ADL, I think that they relied on some of their expertise to decide if it felt like it was or wasn't. I think they took the whole situation into account in terms of his statements on Israel and Jews, the euphoria of the day, and they decided that they felt that it didn't rise to the level of him paying homage to the Nazis. Here at JUF, we're focused, quite frankly, on policy rather than individual personalities. We're a social welfare organization focused on taking care of the most vulnerable and engaging Jewish people in Jewish life. So for me, it's a situation where let Elon describe to us what he intended, and hopefully he'll come out and say, I did not intend a Nazi salute.
I think the less we pay attention to Elon Musk, the better. Going forward. That's going to be my policy going forward. How have people in your organization and the people you know reacted to this ceasefire deal in Gaza?
So at least from our perspective, here we sit, thousands of miles away, and I think the American Jewish community has been praying and hoping with everything in our power to get these hostages back home. And so, when we saw those three young women cross into Israel and greet their family and loved ones, it was incredibly emotional for, I think I speak for the Jewish community here for sure in Chicago. We've been talking and praying about them for a long time, and finally this was a day that we could really celebrate that these people were seemingly healthy. Now, they're going to have obviously significant mental health issues because, being held captive for over 400 days and God only knows what kind of conditions is going to be very difficult. But thank God they're alive and they're with their loved ones. And now is the time for us to also support, which is what we do here in Chicago, mental health services for not just the three women, but also their family members and the people that have been impacted by this 470 days of torture to really kind of get back to some semblance of a normal life. And so we're very, very focused on sending as much resources to the Israeli society and the people of Israel to help them deal with the trauma of the last 474 days. So if you ask me how we felt, there was a sense of relief and a sense of unbelievable excitement that three live young women were coming back to their families, which is terrific, and we look forward to the next wave that should happen in the next couple of days. What concerns us is we don't know how many of the remaining 95 hostages are alive or dead, Joan. And so I think what we're bracing ourselves for is that there could be as much as two-thirds of the remaining 95 that will be returned in body bags. And that is going to be a very difficult thing for us to see and to accept, and especially the families of those loved ones. I mean, can you imagine not knowing and then finding out basically either, the week of, if in fact your family member, your loved one, your father, your brother, your sister, your daughter, what their fate was by just a notice by the government of here's what's happening on this day. It's torture.
It is absolutely unbelievable. I saw... when, the day after the deal was announced, the Washington Post reported, and I don't know if they were parroting information they'd gotten from the Israeli government, but the belief at that time was that if you look at all the hostages that were taken the day of the attack, plus the soldiers who've been taken captive, that there was one speculation, one belief that there were only 60 who were alive. Have you seen any figures? Do you have any idea what the situation is?
We don't have that, except, I've been briefed by people in the Israeli government to be prepared that the remaining 95 that a large majority will not be coming back alive. I hope and pray that's wrong, but that's kind of what I've been told in various high-level briefings that I've received. And again, I hope the intelligence isn't right, but my gut tells me that a large percentage of the 95 that we've been praying for, a large percentage will not come back alive.
And there are still U.S. citizens among the hostages,
yes,
isn't that correct?
There are 7 U.S. citizens still being held in Gaza. We believe that there's hopefully 3 still alive, and 4 of them we believe are deceased. So, again, hoping and praying that we can get those 3 alive hostages back with their families. And, there's a part of me, Joan, you and I have talked throughout this whole process in the last 15, 60 months. I think I've been on a few times. It just feels to me that our country hasn't fully grasped the fact that we had as many citizens, U.S. citizens, that are being held hostage. I remember those when I was a young boy, the Iran hostage situation. Every night you'd hear Ted Koppel, day 47 of and it became a part of the imprint of our generation of this, every night thinking about it, praying for the hostages. And it feels like it just hasn't gotten that kind of attention that it rightfully deserves. And I don't know if it's because it's so far away, but on the other hand, Iran was far away. Yet when U.S. citizens are being held captive, you would think that would create a front and center story, and somehow it's been kind of overtaken by other stories, which is sad to me because we all know that part of, I think, the ethos of this country, and I think for Israel as well, I know for Israel as well, is that we are going to make sure that if you were ever abducted or taken by a foreign enemy, especially by a terrorist organization, we're going to do everything in our power to get you back. That's kind of the contract that I think we have as Americans, and definitely that they have as Israelis, that, we're going to get you back through hell or high water. We're going to figure out a way to get you back if you've been abducted or taken by a foreign adversary.
The initial reporting was that there were going to be 2 phases of the hostage release. The first phase was going to be, the elderly, women, any children, anybody who has injuries of any kind. And then the second phase was going to be the rest of the hostages, plus at that time any soldiers that had been taken captive. That was what I reported on as the day after this became public. But it sounds like phase 1. I knew that there were going to be 3 hostages released within 2 to 3 days. That was going to be the big thing. But it sounds like phase 1 is going to be to continue to release very small numbers of hostages.
That's right. So what we think is going to be the construct of the plan is going to be, there's going to be a 42-day period, which started last Saturday when the actual truce was signed. And on these 42 days, every 5 to 7 days, there'll be another wave of bodies that will be released, similar to the 3 that we saw on Sunday. So that's kind of the plan right now. And, we're hoping and praying that in the next couple of days we'll get the next round of people, and we'll be able to celebrate that and, again, learn more about, these individuals that have, been away from their loved ones and family and home for so long. So, that's it. And so at the end of 42 days, hopefully the 33 number, which is what was agreed to, will be transported back to Israel. And then phase 2 begins, which is, as you described, different demographic of people that were taken, and then it would also probably also involve something having to do with where the IDF forces will be, no longer be, et cetera. But phase 2, and I read something this morning that the phase 2 talks are actually ahead of schedule, the second phase, which is a good thing. That means that the Qataris and the Egyptians and the United States and Israel are actually continuing to talk. Obviously, Hamas is a part of that too, but in terms of making headway on phase 2 of this, so we can begin the process of healing, and we can begin the process of hopefully establishing security for Israel going forward.
Is this happening so slowly because both sides want to make sure the other side doesn't renege on the deal? I don't understand. If we've agreed to this, Lonnie, why isn't it happening?
Yeah, I think there's a piece of it. Listen, Hamas as a terrorist organization definitely engages in psychological warfare. And even you can tell, even on Saturday, they were playing games with, the names and when they were going to release them. And all of that is to just continue to just inflict all kinds of pain and psychological pain on the families. And I do think that the Israelis are concerned. They're concerned that they're going to be able to hopefully find where they are amidst chaos of a war, that they actually have a real accounting system of where these people are. So I think there's some skepticism on the Israeli side as well, and making sure that, in fact, no more rockets are being sent over the border from Gaza into Israel, which they were for the last 400 or so days. So I think, and on the other side, the Hamas, or the other side that's on behalf of Hamas, or are thinking about the logistics of getting back the prisoners. That's the other part of the deal that we didn't talk about. Many of these prisoners that are being released from jails have blood on their hands. They have done heinous acts against Jews and Israelis, and even non-Jews who are Israelis over the years, and they're being released in exchange for these hostages as well. So even that takes up a kind of a life of its own in terms of the logistics of getting hundreds of prisoners out of jails and getting them to places to begin, hopefully, their next life without being ascribing to terror and wreaking havoc on Israelis and Jews going forward, we're very worried. We're very worried that a lot of the people that are getting out of these prisons are going right back to doing the same kind of heinous acts against Jews in Israel as they did before. And, Joan, you probably know this, but Sinwar, who was the mastermind of October 7th, was held in a Israeli jail cell for a long time based on murders that he committed, and he was found guilty in a court of law. And as part of the prisoner exchange deal, for one prisoner, one hostage years ago, they released him from a prison as part of the deal, because Israel, again, going back to the ethos of getting everybody back, they gave up Sinwar back to Hamas, and he turned into the dangerous mastermind of 10/7, where thousands of Israelis were brutally murdered and abducted.
I'm joined by Lonnie Nassiter, who's president at the Jewish United Fund. We are going to take a break and be back with more of this interview in a moment.
Because facts matter. You're listening to WCPT 820.
Hey, if you are a financial planner, a CPA, divorce attorney, heck, even just a listener, if you're wondering why your mortgage professional hasn't returned your calls, it might be because they're one of the more than 165,000 mortgage professionals who did not renew their license over the past 2 years. So if you want to buy a new home or refinance the one you've got, do what I did. Call Team Hochberg. They really are our trusted local lender. And by the way, David Hochberg is going to be joining me on the air. He is going to be with me on Monday. So remember, store up your questions for David Hochberg, because he's always very generous with his time, answering all of the questions of our listeners. So let's review. In the past 24 months, mortgage companies have closed. More than 165,000 loan officers have left the profession. But Team Hochberg has expanded. They've added loan officers. They're stronger than ever, and they want your business. So do what I did and call them, 855-563-2843. Let's say that again, Joan, 855-563-2843, or go online on your computer and type in 56david.com. Lower.com equal housing lender, NMLS 1124061.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
With me is Lonnie Nassiter, president at the Jewish United Fund. We have been talking about what is going on in Gaza. Lonnie, correct me if I'm wrong, but at least for phase one, the ratio seems to be 30 Palestinian prisoners released for every hostage. Is that correct?
And in some instances, it may even be more.
Really?
Yeah. So you're probably going to, at the end of the day, be well over 1,000 prisoners after it's all said and done. So it's significant concession on behalf of the Israelis. But again, it goes back to our first segment, is that, again, the ethos of Israel and the Israeli leaders right now is that getting every person back, and unfortunately some, as we talked about, may not even be alive, but they actually have the bodies back to do the appropriate burial and have some closure for these poor families, is when you're kind of calculating the back and forth here, the importance of having that social contract be delivered and be adhered to, and that is to get our people back, even though we're making significant concessions, as Israel speaking, by putting bad, violent people back into society. It felt at this time that the government was ready to make those concessions to get them home.
Well, there have been, I've just been amazed at the pressure that Israeli citizens have put on their government. And
Sure.
There was reporting. I know that, some people have said, well, Benjamin Netanyahu is a little concerned that if all this wraps up, he's going to be facing charges in a court of law. But it seems like he has been very supportive of this process. On the other hand, Itamar Ben-Gvir has announced publicly and somewhat proudly that over the last year he killed repeated hostage deals. How's that going to go down with the people of Israel?
Well, like most bureaucracies, you have parts of the party that would agree with Ben-Gvir's notion in terms of standing strong and not giving up a concession in terms of, getting out of Gaza, giving up prisoners. That's his approach. I think he's probably in the minority, at least looking at the polling of Israelis right now. The majority of Israelis are absolutely in favor of the current iteration of this deal, and that is giving up prisoners for getting these people back and understanding fully that what the risks are if you, in fact, put back many people, again, that are violent people that want to do harm to Jews in Israel. Putting them back in society obviously creates major risk, but at this point in time, it's more important for the majority of Israelis feeling that they need to get these people back because these families have gone through absolute agony for 474 days, knowing that they could be sitting in the dungeons of Gaza with maybe a piece of pita bread to eat every day, no sunlight, no exercise, no semblance of engagement. I mean, this is the worst type of torture one can think of.
It absolutely is. So is there no information or just limited information about who's still alive and who is not? Again,
what we are hearing is that we believe with somewhat certainty that at least 25 of the remaining 90 or so are in fact alive. Let's hope it's more than that. But, this is, I know as much as what I've been hearing, quite frankly. So, and I think even intelligence doesn't fully know, right? If they would have known exactly where they were, the IDF forces would have gotten them out of harm's way, but they've been hidden in certain places that have been hard to get to. There's only been a few instances where the Israel Defense Forces were able to find some hostages. One was in an apartment complex, et cetera. It's been very difficult. It's booby-trapped. It's hard to get to. And
recently there was that one effort where they were trying to free the hostages, and before they could get to them, Hamas shot and killed 4 of them.
Yes, they did, including our own Hersh Goldberg, whose family is from Chicago, and I know his parents very well, and his aunt, and both of his grandmas live in Chicago. So, yes, Hersh was one of those that they knew they were getting close, and instead of giving them up, which is the honorable thing to do, they shot them at point-blank range, and they all died of gun wounds. And thankfully, IDF got the bodies back so they could have an appropriate burial. But it's a great example of one of the few times IDF was real close to getting them out of harm's way, and the Hamas terrorists put a bullet to their head.
Switching gears a little bit, we had in the last Trump presidency, we had a real rise in hate crimes. I know that the Jewish community has already seen a rise in hate incidents. Are you particularly worried about what's coming?
So, yes, we are, and we've been, incidents have been going up methodically for the last couple of years, a significant spike after October 7th, which is what we saw. Ironically, Jews that were slaughtered actually promoted more anti-Semitism in this country, which is a little bit counterintuitive, but it is what it is. And it was so quick that the narrative of Israel being vulnerable and being preyed upon by terrorists all of a sudden was flipped around to all of a sudden Israel is becoming the aggressors, et cetera. But that led to a lot of people taking out their anti-Israel, anti-Jewish sentiment in very dangerous ways. So are we worried? Yes. Are we comforted by, parts of government that we know are working on our behalf. For example, right here in Chicago, the Chicago Police Department, not just post-October 7th, Joan, since I used to be a prosecutor, my experience in over 30 years in dealing with Chicago police has been nothing but productive when it comes to taking care of the Jewish community. Whenever we've asked them in the last 15 months and things have been a tad hectic and sometimes stressful, they said, where do you need us? We're here for you. If you need more security, we'll help you out. So they've been nothing but really out there. There was an incident in West Rogers Park just a few months ago, if you remember, and they immediately apprehended this person that wanted to kill Jews. And as a result, that person took his own life, you remember, in the jail cell. But nevertheless, they were on the scene immediately, and they apprehended this person who wanted to inflict harm on the Jewish community. So, we know that we're still in America, where at the end of the day, the majority of Americans aren't haters. The majority of Americans believe in the American ethos of pluralism, of religious liberty, of religious freedom, that people should be able to pray where they want. I believe that in my heart of hearts. And you just got to make sure that those really dangerous voices are put back into the ground, so to speak, and that we don't normalize anti-Semitism, or for that matter, any form of hate. Like the minute that I'm not being called upon to comment on a swastika at a temple, or black leaders aren't commented when, God forbid, something happens where someone used the N-word or a noose is found at a school, that's when I believe our society begins to really deteriorate, is when we aren't completely aghast at these types of things, because it's so antithetical to the way we should live as Americans and who we are as Americans. So the minute we start normalizing hate and anti-Semitism, then we as a civilization begin to kind of take a step backwards. So we all have a responsibility to call it out. We all have a responsibility to make sure that it doesn't become mainstreamed, and that those voices by leaders are put to the side and condemned. And that's what we'll be asking people to do if, in fact, these numbers continue to kick up, which I hope that they don't.
Lonnie Nassiter, president at Jewish United Fund. Lonnie, thanks again for joining me.
Thank you. Anytime, Joan. Take care.
You too. That is going to do it for me today. A bit of a breaking story today. We've got another fire in L.A. The fires previously were winding down, but this is called the Hughes Fire. It's northern L.A. County. 19,000 people are under a mandatory evacuation order. 19,000 people. This is a northern L.A. County. It is new and it is bad. We are keep an eye on this over the next couple of days. That's it for me. Chicago historian Adam Selzer will be in for Patty tonight. We do expect the little frozen New Orleans traveler to be back in her regular seat tomorrow for Driving It Home with Patty Vasquez from 5 to 7 p.m. I want to also tell you that Richard Chu tomorrow is going to be talking to Illinois State Rep Will Guzzardi and also Prairie Band Potawatomi Nation Chairman Joseph Zeke Rupnick. Also, LaTanya Woodson, Director of Community Health Education at Edgewater Health in Gary, Indiana. That's Richard Chu. He starts our day here at WCPT every morning at 6 a.m. I, of course, will be back tomorrow at 2 p.m. You couldn't get rid of me if you tried. We're going to be talking to Joan Walsh from The Nation magazine. Also going to do a little pet of the month, a little palate cleanser. Don't you think we've earned it? I do. Lady B and I will be back in the saddle tomorrow. Take care. Stay safe. Have a great show, Adam. And I will see you, the listener, tomorrow at 2 p.m. Good night.